Hello. I am delighted to welcome everyone to Music, Hearing Loss, and the Brain, a conversation with Dr. Francis Collins and Huey Lewis. I am Dr. Nancy Young, the fifth woman president of the American Otological Society and a surgeon scientist dedicated to childhood hearing loss. I have a few words to share with you about the American Otological Society, known as the AOS. Founded in 1868, the mission of the AOS is to improve the lives of individuals across the lifespan suffering from hearing loss and balance disorders. Since its founding, the AOS has been a senior society of leading clinicians and scientists known physicians and scientists, and we're known as AOS Fellows. Our focus is on education and research to improve the lives of children and adults who are suffering from ear-related disorders. We have a long history of providing grants and supporting innovative basic science and translational research. Almost all of our grant recipients have gone on to receive federal funding to expand their research that started with AOS support. As proud as we are of our history and our contributions, much remains to be done. Our goal is to transform hearing health care for everyone, because everyone, directly or through a loved one, is impacted by loss of hearing and or balance. We are also committed to expanding our education program for professionals and the public. Hence, our new webinar series initiated by past president, Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar. Today's webinar, its topic is near and dear to my heart. What could be more essential to quality of life than music? I have many childhood memories of the sense of belonging that came from singing with others in school and summer camp. As I lacked musical talent, I did not pursue my childhood dream of singing on Broadway. Fortunately, the gift of hearing enables me to enjoy music that others create. As a surgeon, I have been blessed to provide deaf children with cochlear implants, a device which provides electrical stimulation to the inner ear, enabling the brain to perceive sounds and many children to develop spoken language. For years, I have been intrigued by the benefits of music therapy, including improved clarity of speech, increased engagement with others, and joy. One of my patients, born without hearing, became a superb violinist, speaks 3 languages, and is studying aeronautical engineering. Somehow, his brain can use the implant signals more effectively than most of us with typical hearing. I have no doubt that research to understand the neural mechanisms of hearing and language can lead to new brain-based therapies to improve music and speech perception. Our panel of speakers will be led by my colleague, Dr. Charles Lim, an AOS Fellow. Charles is a neurotologist, neuroscientist, and musician. His research interests include the neural basis of musical creativity and the impact of cochlear implants on music perception. Joining Charles is Dr. Francis Collins, a distinguished physician scientist and musician who led the Human Genome Project and served for 11 years as director of NIH. Under his leadership, NIH began funding research to understand and harness music to improve health and wellness. And finally, Huey Lewis, lead vocalist of the rock band Huey Lewis and the News, whose songs we all know and love. His career as an award-winning singer, songwriter, harmonica player, and actor was impacted by hearing loss. During this webinar, please feel free to enter comments into the chat. Let us know who you are, where you're from, and what questions you have so that we can use them later in the open Q&A. Please be aware that captioning is available through um, this platform. You simply need to turn it on. And now I invite Dr. Charles Lim to take it away.
Thank you, Nancy, and hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a true privilege to welcome two true luminaries, not just in the world of music, but just in the world more broadly, Dr. Francis Collins and Huey Lewis. And we've decided, just for the purposes of a more casual conversation, that we'll be going by our first names. As was mentioned, my name is Charles Lim. I'm the chief of otology at UC San Francisco, but I really started out my life as a musician. And I would say that if I've had one obsession my entire life, it has been music, and in particular, trying to understand how it's possible that the brain does this thing called music and how we can perceive it and enjoy it. It led me not to become a musician because I never had the guts to do what Huey did, but it led me to think about hearing and sound in a way that I think enabled me to understand how music could be useful, maybe for an otologist. And so what we're going to do today is have a completely unscripted conversation. And by way of introduction for these tremendous individuals, I'll tell you a little bit about their story and their background, and then we'll hear from them individually. And then we're going to have a bit of a structured conversation before we turn to an open conversation with pretty much anybody that would like to ask a question. And I want to welcome not just the American Otologicial Society membership, but also people from beyond. This talk was advertised and open to the general public, and we're glad to see people that are joining us internationally, and welcome to all of you. Now, Dr. Francis Collins is truly somebody who does not need any introduction. In the field of otology lately, one of the real advances has been the possibility of successful gene therapy for sensorineural hearing loss. And this has been a truly profound moment in time for us as a specialty because it really marks, it's as profound as when the cochlear implant was developed, but it marks the beginning of a new era, hopefully, of therapies. Well, if you know anything about genetics, you really owe a huge debt to Dr. Francis Collins because maybe we have not had any more in our era impactful person in terms of leading human genomics, in terms of innovations, in terms of science, in terms of national policy. So Dr. Collins pioneered positional cloning to identify genes as a technique, and using that technique, he co-discovered first the cystic fibrosis gene in 1989. He then helped identify the neurofibromatosis type 1 gene, which is a disease we're very familiar with, and then contributed to discovering the Huntington disease gene. He was appointed director of the National Human Genome Research Institute in 1993, and he was the leader and really the face of the Human Genome Project to its completion in 2003. And this led really a whole new era of medicine. You can call it genomics, you can call it precision medicine, but it was really the next wave of thinking about how science and how genetics can affect the way we actually live our lives, and whether or not there would be therapies or options for treatment that emerged from that. As Dr. Young mentioned, Francis was the director of the NIH from 2009 to 2021, the longest serving tenured acting director of the NIH. And I was very fortunate to have a key intersection point with Francis over those years as we embarked on something called the Sound Health Network, which is an initiative that I'll tell you about a little bit more, but really indebted to not just his leadership of the NIH, but also his advocacy for music and his caring about the importance of music and the arts and well-being. In his work, he also advanced the major national initiative, including the Brain Initiative and All of Us. And then, if that were not enough, he basically led the US biomedical infrastructure and enterprise during COVID-19. And so Francis Collins this is Francis as a younger man. I imagine right around that time, he was probably thinking about his guitar because he was learning music. And this became a key thing in Francis's life. As you'll see, music has been a constant thread in his life. This is probably around the time, I imagine, Francis, that the cystic fibrosis gene was being identified.
Yeah,
And
about that.
yes, and so I can just imagine what was going on, and not just in your mind, but also look at the lab. You look at the light box, look at the gel behind you. I mean, this is clearly a different era of medicine, and you were able to make such tremendous pivotal advances with really what we would consider today to be very primitive technologies. Now here you are with your favorite and famed guitar, and all of you will note on the fingerboard, what do you see there? You see a double helix. And so this is a careful inlay work that was done to symbolize Francis's work, but also is a guitar that he, carries, as far as I can tell, he seems to have it with him almost everywhere he goes. And it has been something I've heard him play, and Francis plays in a band. He's an amazing musician, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And then here he was when he was director of the NIH. Now, the concept of music as medicine is something that I think many of us think about as almost a quaint idea, but at the Sound Health Network and at the NIH, we've been trying to think about how that's actually a real idea. And so I'm going to show you a video that introduces this topic of the Sound Health Network and what took place. It started in January 2017. So the field of music cognition and music research had existed for several decades as kind of, I would say, isolated, siloed research projects, not really as a coordinated effort, and certainly not something that had the effort of the full support of the NIH behind it. But in 2017, you can see Dr. Collins in the upper left corner there. He's there next to Renee Fleming. Basically, they convened about 25 researchers to the NIH to essentially educate the NIH about the state of music research in the field. And over 2 days, we basically went through some of the most important research advances. And this led to something called the Sound Health Initiative, which was a collaboration not just with the NIH and researchers, but also importantly with the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts, the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts, and also the National Endowment for the Arts. And here's a short video showing you how that happened. The findings from the workshop were published in a paper in Neuron, which you can go read if you're interested, and it will sort of tell you the nature of the conversation that took place not quite 10 years ago.
Sound Health is a new initiative we're exploring with the NIH. Under the leadership of Renee Fleming, who began this dialogue with Dr. Collins, we're really looking to find out how is a creative life a more healthy life.
It's an exciting time in neuroscience. We're starting to learn ways in which music can influence all kinds of other aspects of one's brain function, and especially how we could use that information to use music therapeutically.
When I met Francis Collins, who I discovered was a really terrific musician, it occurred to me this might be an opportunity. If people are, through music therapy, succeeding in helping patients, children with autism, patients with Parkinson's, stroke victims who can then communicate because they can sing but they can't speak, the science of healing in the arts, it's another area of exploding research.
This has a research component to it, it has a presentational component to it, it has an advocacy component to it as well in terms of where culture in America today is going.
Through this initiative, we can all learn from each other, and we can move into a new space of integration of deep intellectual and scientific thought.
The fact that this is coming together, that the NIH and the Kennedy Center are collaborating, it makes the arts more relevant. It exalts the importance of the arts in our lives.
So through the Sound Health Network, we then convened to discuss the importance of music and health and well-being. And this was right before Dr. Collins made the announcement globally that the NIH was going to start funding music research. And the first foray was by awarding $20 million, which then became $40 million of funding over the 5-year period to study music therapy and neuroscience. And while this may not be a lot from the perspective of, say, cancer therapeutics, it was a lot for music researchers. And it took a huge effort on the part of Francis Collins to get the NIH to agree to this. I mean, he was essentially taking funds from people's budgets and have to convince them of the value and the importance of this kind of work. And so, again, very, very grateful for that. We wound up then recruiting the National Endowment for the Arts, who importantly noticed the need and recognized the importance of having a network. We launched during COVID. I was grateful to be the co-director of that network. And then what wound up happening was we would have events at the Kennedy Center where we would bring together musicians such as this together to convene on an almost annual basis where we had public events. And in these public events, we essentially celebrated music, but we also celebrated science. We celebrated research, and we celebrated the idea that we should all be talking to one another. So another thing happened in 1950, which was that Huey Lewis was born. And so, for those of you that, depending on when you grew up, some of you grew up with Huey Lewis's voice essentially as being a key part of almost your early adulthood or adolescence. I know I did. In the 1980s, Huey's voice was everywhere because he was the frontman of Huey Lewis and the News, which was one of the biggest American pop rock bands in the 80s. Had many, many commercial breakthroughs, but he had a hit album called Sports in 1983 that led to a multi-platinum blockbuster hits, Heart and Soul, I Want a New Drug, If This Is It, and then had the number one single. His first number one single was The Power of Love, which was featured in the movie Back to the Future, which many of you, I think, have seen. That came out in 1985. It's hard to believe it's already 1985 since that movie came out. He had a huge follow-up album after that, which was called Four. And over the course of his musical career, had three number one hits, 12 top 10 hits, and then also a Grammy in 1986. And if you've heard his music, it's a blend of many things. It has rock, it has pop, it has soul, it has rhythm and blues. But what you notice, or at least what I notice, is the voice. And Huey's voice is so distinctive, it's so rich, it's so pure that it makes listening to him a joy. And I will tell you, one of his movies that is a little less well known, but for me was a favorite, was Duets, where you could really hear Huey singing at multiple occasions. He did also have a cameo in Back to the Future. And so here was Huey as a child. Now, you can see those eyes, but you can't quite see the voice. You'll hear emerge here. So this is Huey. He was born Hugh Craig, and then switched his name for Huey Lewis as a stage name. This is Huey earlier on his career, and then here he is with Huey Lewis and the News in the 1980s. Now, right around the time of Back to the Future, they released the soundtrack, and you can see it in the circle up here. It says featuring the Power of Love by Huey Lewis and the News. And I think we can all just understand the value of just turning off our brains and just going to listen to some music. I could listen to that all day long. And here's Huey a little bit later on in his life. Now, importantly, some of you are well aware of the health difficulties that Huey faced in terms of his otologic condition, and he did develop Meniere's disease. Unfortunately, this stopped him from being able to perform. And around 2018, he announced that because of his Meniere's disease, he would no longer perform in public. He had significant symptoms with his Meniere's disease, but with a profound hearing loss. And very recently, I did have the good fortune of meeting him in my clinic, and then he recently received a cochlear implant at the Mayo Clinic by Dr. Colin Driscoll, one of the American Otologicial Society key members. For those of you that are not from the world of otology, just a key refresher on what's happening with Meniere's disease. So this is a drawing of what happens in hearing. In order for you to hear sounds, it vibrates air through your ear canal, hits the eardrum, goes into the inner ear here. Well, this structure, the cochlea, in a way starts having a malfunction, almost like the battery that drives the inner ear starts to die slowly over time. And it's not just the hearing part, it's also the vestibular or balance part, which looks like this. And these membranes that are inside this bony organ of a very particular shape starts to distend with fluid, and we call it hydrops. And this is kind of a schematic drawing of what happens with hydrops. If you're interested in this, there's a fantastic review in Nature Reviews by Takashima from 2016 that you can read that just kind of goes over the basics of what this condition is and what it's not. And I will tell you, it's been a very vexing condition in the field of otology because of its relentless nature. And unfortunately, in some cases, the only options we have for hearing restorations are the cochlear implant. Now, the treatment for hearing loss has thankfully evolved, but unfortunately not evolved as much as we would like. In the 1800s, we were doing very primitive things like cones and ear-shaped objects, and then now we have the modern multi-channel cochlear implant, which is a tremendous, is a miracle of modern medicine. But I think most ear surgeons would tell you, especially if you're a musician, that if you lost your hearing and had to have a cochlear implant, you would never want to get one for the purposes of music because it's just not good enough. It's not quite there yet, technologically speaking, to give you music back. And that's a very multi-layered conversation. And I'd like to have that conversation with Huey, but obviously this is something that is the field is grappling with because music is in a way a higher order or more complex, more challenging form of sound, and we need to be able to make the technologies be able to reproduce that. And I firmly believe if you could hear music, you should be able to hear any sound. Unfortunately, nowadays, when you get a cochlear implant, you can break down music into component parts such as pitch, rhythm, timbre, sound quality, and dynamics. And what you see is that the things that are in red on this chart are just not working well. And in particular, the pitch perspectives are out of tune, which leads to a whole range of distortions in music. Ultimately, this affects the emotional significance of music. Not only is it incorrect, but it sounds unpleasant for many people because you're now taking things that are supposed to be consonant and intentional, and they're becoming distorted and dissonant. And this is from a review paper that my colleagues, Dr. Nikki Jim and Dr. Meredith Caldwell, did while they were working in my lab earlier. And so what happens is the piano keyboard doesn't really sound like this. It sounds more like this. Now, importantly, the human brain, once it's been musically trained or once it's been musically developed, doesn't necessarily lose its musicianship once you lose hearing or if you lose hearing. And a good example of that is the skull, because the skull belongs to Beethoven. And so Beethoven's skull was actually exhumed as an attempt to understand how he lost his hearing. And there's actually molding clay you can see there on the right side of his skull that was put there to put the skull back together after the temporal bones were harvested. And so this is Beethoven, who notably lost his hearing early in his career. Actually, around the third symphony, he started to lose it. But by the ninth symphony, the famous symphony that we all know, he was profoundly impaired, and yet was able to compose that ninth symphony, even though he was fundamentally deaf. And this brings us to the question of the brain. And as an otologist who cares about music, I find that you really just can't figure out music by staring at the tympanic membrane or looking down an otoscope. It just does not work. You have to start looking at the brain and asking higher order questions. And so with that background and introduction, what I'm going to do is now invite Dr. Francis Collins to say some words for us.
Well, thank you, Charles. Let me just check and be sure you can hear me all right.
Perfect.
Okay. And what an honor to be part of this AOS gathering. Charles, with you, my friend, over all these years, and with Nancy Young, the president, and woohoo, with Huey Lewis, who is one of my musical heroes, because yes, I do remember The Power of Love. I was not that young when that came out, and it's still like one of those remarkable songs and a remarkable performer. So glad to be able to join you. You might wonder, how does this NIH director get engaged in all of this? Part of it was I grew up in a family where music was really important. My father was a violinist, but he had also become a folk song collector in Western North Carolina. So if you go to the Library of Congress and look at the Folk Life collection, you'll find more than 200 songs collected by Fletcher Collins, my father. And those are songs that people are now picking up and relearning and singing again. So when I was growing up, what you did after dinner on our farm that had no indoor plumbing, it was music. And if you wanted to be part of the family, you better learn to play some instruments. So I learned keyboards and then I learned guitar, and it gave me great joy. And for a while, maybe like you, Charles, I thought maybe I would be a musician. I figured though I wasn't maybe quite good enough. So instead, I went into science. But I always wanted to have a chance for this musical part of me to connect to the scientific part of me. And there were times where it sort of seemed like that might happen, but not as often as I would like. So I'll tell you a very quick story. It was 2015. It was the summertime. There was a dinner party in a small, very exclusive restaurant outside of Washington that somehow my wife and I were invited to. And we got there and realized, oh my, this is quite a dinner party because there are 3 Supreme Court justices present. But somehow the evening was a little tense. It seems the Supreme Court had just issued their decision about gay marriage. And in the room were 3 justices who had played critical roles: Antonin Scalia, who had voted strongly against, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who wrote the opinion in favor, and Anthony Kennedy, who had been the swing vote for this 5-4 finding. And clearly, some of the things that were written in those outcomes were not very complimentary to each other, and it felt a little uncomfortable. And so we all kind of got through the dinner, and then they moved us outside and thought maybe it'll be a little more relaxed out there. And there was a bluegrass band playing. And the organizers had suggested I bring my guitar because, as Charles has mentioned, I often do. So I got my guitar out and started playing with the band, not knowing what else to do. And then this stunning woman came out of the crowd and came up to the band and said, maybe it would help if we all decided to sing something. And I realized, oh my God, it's Renee Fleming, who I had never met. And I was terrified that she was going to suggest Puccini because I don't know any Puccini. But I should have known better. Renee Fleming has this incredibly eclectic admiration for all styles of music. And so in a matter of 30 seconds or so, we figured out we had a shared repertoire, and on we went. I think the first song we sang was The Water is Wide, which is the oldest English folk song. And something happened. The tense gathering suddenly seemed to be less tense, and people were listening up. And pretty soon we said, well, why don't you sing with us? We'll sing Country Roads, we'll sing Shenandoah, we'll find things that people know. And the transformation that happened right then was a great indication of how music can bring people together in ways that maybe words alone can't quite do, even alcohol can't quite do. Put it together with singing and something happens. And so I, after that, said to Renee, I'd love to talk to you more about this. It turned out she was about to start a year-long residency at the Kennedy Center, and she was looking for a project. So we met and we talked about maybe this is the moment to bring neuroscience and music performance and music therapy together and see if we could learn ways by what we're understanding now about the brain to make music therapy even more evidence-based and even more successful. And that's how that first meeting that Charles showed you a picture of in early parts of 2017 got started and started this Sound Health Initiative, which then did lead to about $40 million of additional research. And we've learned a ton since then. I'll give you one little snapshot because we're talking about music in interesting ways. There's a neuroscientist at UCSF. He's a neurosurgeon, and Charles, I'm sure, knows him really well, named Eddie Chang. And he operates on people with epilepsy. And of course, you want to know before you operate on somebody with epilepsy exactly where is the site in the brain that's kicking off these seizures. So sometimes you have to bring them into the hospital and put electrodes all over the surface of their brain and wait for a seizure to happen. Sometimes you wait a while. And so many times those people are bored, and with appropriate consent, they're asked, would you be willing to let your brain be recorded while certain things are happening, like playing music? And what Eddie figured out based on that is that there are 3 circuits in the acoustic cortex that respond to music in interesting ways. One of them is about pitch. Okay, that makes sense. One is about a pitch interval. Is this note higher or lower than the one just before? But the one that blew me away is the 3rd circuit, which is anticipating what the next note is going to be. Your brain has somehow, over the course of evolutionary time, developed an important feature of being able to anticipate a melody and where it's going. Think about that. Must have been some benefit to us. And if you imagine yourself listening to a tune you haven't heard before, you do kind of know where the melody's going, don't you? And if it doesn't go there, it kind of surprises you, and maybe you don't like it, or maybe you love it. But all of that is because those circuits in your brain are processing these electrical signals in really interesting ways. That's just one small example. Meanwhile, we've done a lot of research on ways in which music therapy could be even more effective for people with chronic pain, for instance, in the face of problems of aging like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, in issues about childhood like autism. All of those things are yielding up some pretty interesting findings on the basis of research. So this is a very exciting feature. I have to say right now it's a little tougher because our happy collaboration between NIH and the Kennedy Center and the National Endowment of the Arts and the Renee Fleming Foundation kind of had to get knocked back a bit over the course of the last year because of a lot of the things that have happened. But the momentum is there, and the critical mass of people interested in this are happening in other ways. And we're building a workforce of individuals who are really going to make this a big part of their professional career. So, and many thanks to Charles, who's been a real leader in this space, for continuing to gather people together like we're doing tonight to talk about the potential here. And I do believe as a consequence of all this, we're going to have more and more opportunities for music therapy, which does not require you to take a pill, to be provided in a circumstance where people are suffering from something. And this could be a way to give them some relief and some healing. So it's a joy for me to be part of this. And I should get out of the way and let you hear to Mr. Huey Lewis, who I suspect is the main reason most of you signed up.
Thank you, Francis, and I'm indebted to you for your leadership and for giving this whole field a home at the NIH. And thank you for everything. And it's my pleasure to welcome Huey. Huey, everybody would love to say hello. I'm going to have you turn your camera on for us.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Perfect.
Thanks very much, Charles. And Francis, so happy that you're in our world, you know. Uh, um, my story is as follows. As a kid, I had a lot of earaches, and my dad was a radiologist, but a doctor also. And I remember him always telling me, "You," because I played baseball. He said, "You have a great arm, but you have lousy eustachian tubes." And every flu season, I would get earaches, and then I would get penicillin shots, and that happens sort of every season. Fast forward in mid '80s, I I had a knockdown drive bout of vertigo that before a gig in Massachusetts, I couldn't crawl up in a ball, was throwing up, was nauseous, and they took me to the hospital, gave me a Thorazine suppository, and in 2 hours I was fine. And they said, and vaguely heard Meniere's, whatever. A few years later, I lost my right ear. One day, I woke up and it was kind of gone. And I took, they thought it was, took antibiotics and so on, but it never came back. And my father was a doctor, recommended a great ENT guy in our community in Northern California, sort of a legendary guy. And he looked at my ear and all that stuff, and he said, "Well, get used to it." I said, "What?" He says, "Get used to it." I said, "What? I'm a musician. I'm a singer." He says, "Hey, you only need one ear." He said, "Jimi Hendrix had one ear. Brian Wilson had one ear. I have one ear, and I'm in a barbershop quartet." I said, "Really?" "Yeah." So then, sort of semi-comforted, I went to do a gig, and I was apprehensive because I have in-ear monitors, which are stereo monitors. So they're, if the guitar's over here and the other horns are over here or whatever it is. And now I only really effectively have one good ear. This ear's 10% or something. And I was amazed on the gig how my brain moved everything to the middle so that everything sounded, pretty normal. And I existed on that one ear for, 25 years. And then 8 years ago, before a gig, suddenly this ear just collapsed. And I remember waking up from my nap and getting ready to go do my gig. And we went down through the hotel, and the opening band, it sounded like there was warfare going on. I said, what is that?" And they said, "Oh, that's the opening band. That's Pat Green, the opening act." I said, "Oh my God, it sounds like a war." And then I tried to put my ears in. No good. I couldn't hear pitch. Couldn't hear. Everything sounded like it was coming out of a blown speaker or something. So the next day, I flew to Los Angeles where my son lives, and I went to House Air Institute, and they had a long, they shot steroids in my eardrum and put me on a program of steroids for 28 days, and I began, and they said, "Oh, low salt or no salt," and I began 6 months of trying this, that, and the other thing. No salt, no drinking, no cranial massage. Went to acupuncture, and nothing seemed to work. And my hearing was spiraling down. It would fluctuate. It would get boom, it would come back, and then spiral down. And then finally, it got so bad, and I went to Starkey Institute, who really helped me with my hearing aids at first, and and after a while, it just collapsed so bad, I couldn't hear anything, and I knew Dr. Driscoll from before. I'd seen him through mutual friends, and it we decided it would be time, and I got a cochlear implant, and it's been miraculous. It's fantastic in that it's enabled me to talk conversationally to people, and I don't have to read their lips or anything. I can kind of hear them. Now, music is still a very big challenge, unfortunately, and it's no fun. Um, but it's been 1 year. Well, it will be 1 year, April 1, with my cochlear, and I'm better. I'm a little better, and it's a struggle still. It's not fun. It's a struggle still. But I think, and I'm certainly a candidate for another one in my other ear. And if I think if I can do that and struggle with it, the one thing everybody knows about CIs is that they color your other people. People, they say people sound like Mickey Mouse. They sound like they took a breath of helium and then spoke. So it actually changes the pitch of voices. And I think it kind of does the same thing to music. So it's very complex. And sometimes one note will be out of tune with itself in a funny way. It's almost as if it was harmonized. And then you have to stroke. And of course, in my own head, I can stay in tune, I can hear pitch, I can sing, all that stuff. But when I hear somebody plays a cluster of a chord cluster, it sounds like cacophony for me. It's almost like, I mean, I suppose, and Francis could tell us all about this. He knows all about this. Is that it's more complicated to hear the music than speech, say, or so, because it occurs in so many frequencies and overtones and harmonics and all that, and it just kind of comes at you like that. And so it's one, but I gotta say, I am better today than I was when I first got my cochlear, and I'm a candidate for another one on this side, and I'm going to try to hold out for a totally implantable one, which is totally internal, and it will enable me to swim and so on. But I thank God for cochlear implants, or I wouldn't be able to speak to you right now. So thanks to Charles and Francis, and keep up the good work.
Huey, thanks so much for sharing some of your personal story. I know it's been a challenge and frustrating in so many ways. I mentioned your voice earlier and how so much of what people know about you is this kind of signature voice you have. What does your own voice sound like to you when you hear a recording of yourself nowadays?
Well, I don't even recognize it if I hear a recording of myself. I mean, have to admit that, if I go to an event, we have a golf event that I do with, sorry, a golf event which we do in Monterey Peninsula, and there's a band, and there's in a small venue, and they get up, and I know all the guys, and they play. I can't and they play my songs, and sometimes I can't recognize the song. I mean, it's that bad, It's just very frustrating, and I think I could be better if I worked at it harder, but it's just not fun. So I don't know. I'm waiting for you guys to figure it out a little better.
And considering that you know your own music very well, does that help you interpret what you're hearing when you're hearing your own music?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and the stuff that I know. I mean, I have a catalog of stuff that my favorite stuff, and uh, I know it. So I mean, do I hear it? Kinda. It's just that I know it, you know.
I'm
Honestly,
gonna
I can't say that my CI has helped me with music. I really can't. I mean, I wish I could, but I can't. And mind you, I think if I struggled, if I worked harder at it, it would be better. But it's no fun, so I don't.
I'm going to invite Francis now to join in on our conversation. So you two may not realize this, but you were both born just a few months apart from each other. I think you were about 3 to 4 months apart, and your birthday is in 1950. And Francis, you mentioned that you grew up on a farm in Virginia. Huey, you were born in New York City, but then raised in Marin County in Northern California. And somehow your path took you both to music, but then to different ways. Francis, what's your reaction to hearing Huey's story about his hearing loss?
It's very instructive. And Huey, thank you for telling us exactly what it's like to have this experience, because those of us who've not experienced what it's like to try to interpret music with a cochlear implant, it's really helpful to hear your description. And I think we agree, and Charles, you can probably tell us sort of this needs to get better with the next generation or the generation after that. So this remarkable, miraculous bit of engineering that allows people to hear can also allow them to enjoy the experience of music again, because your experience is quite much like everybody I've talked to with a cochlear implant who wants to be able to enjoy music and just has trouble doing so. So Charles, what's the next step here? What are people working on now? Now that we know there are those circuits in the acoustic cortex that can interpret pitch and even pitch intervals and even anticipate the next note, can you figure out a way to build on that information to make the next generation of implants?
Um, Thanks, Francis. Yes, I'll say thanks to your work. Actually, the genomics of the inner ear is alive and well as a field, and I think we're making huge strides as a field towards understanding the true genetic lineage of the inner ear and the cells in the inner ear, and that should hopefully pave the way to some sort of meaningful regeneration and reconnecting of synapses. But we're far clinically from that. The other thing I think we're learning is that with a cochlear implant, as effective as it is, it's still very crude fundamentally. And we're just supplying electrical current into the inner ear in ways that are just not specific or precise enough. And so it's possible, even plausible, that the implant of the future may not rely on electricity. Maybe it will be some combination of optogenetics or some other optical form of stimulation to get more precise neural stimulation. But I will tell you this, music to me is it's both the pinnacle of hearing, but it's also the target. And I keep referring to it mentally and intellectually and scientifically, meaning how close are we? And if I can't tell Huey that we can give him the ability to hear his voice and the melody of his songs that he wrote in his other ear, I'll tell you, we're not anywhere close. And so, and I feel like we've hit a bit of a technical plateau, and it's sort of time that we kind of move past that plateau. And I do want to ask you both some questions about what led you to do what you do. Huey, when did you know you were going to become a musician, and what gave you that decision?
Oh, I my dad was a doctor, but his passion was music, and he's a jazz drummer and a piano player, so he always had music around the house. But he didn't like singers; he liked big band stuff, and so I always gravitated to the singers, and I had to find my own little niche, and I loved R&B music. I was a black music snob for years until I went to college, and I played music, and then I joined a fraternity band, a band that played fraternity, and we had to learn the top 40. And I suddenly realized that, I prefer to listen to certain types of music, but all music was fun to play or to try to play. And like Duke Ellington said, there's only two kinds of music, good and bad. And so then I suddenly wasn't so much of a snob anymore. And but I think the original intent for me is my dad used to have jam sessions that he had, and he played drums for a guy called Ralph Sutton, who was a stride piano player, world greatest jazz band. And my dad and my mother would have these jam sessions, and my mom would make spaghetti and stuff, and they'd all come and jam. And someone, Ben Webster came to one at one point, and this, and I just watched these guys play music and watched how happy it made everybody feel. And I just said to myself, that's what I want. I want to be part of that. And so that was the inspiration for me. Music just makes people feel good. And what's wrong with that?
Huey, when we first met, you told me that when the band is playing behind you and everything is tight, it's the best feeling in the world.
Yeah, it's a wave that you ride, isn't it? We all try to get in the pocket or just but sometimes when you're right there and maybe it's ensemble, usually it's ensemble, and you look at and oh my gosh, it's almost as if the music is playing itself, and you're just riding that wave, and that's nothing better than that.
And then, Francis, when did you decide you were going to become a scientist from a farm in Shenandoah Valley?
I was homeschooled till the sixth grade because my parents didn't trust the local schools. But then we moved in town and I went to public school. And in 10th grade, I had a chemistry teacher named John House who was just inspiring. And he got me excited about science as a way of kind of being a detective, that like there are aspects of nature that are waiting to be figured out. And that's what the scientist gets to do. And if you do it right and you have the right experimental tools, you're going to discover things that weren't known before. That's what I thought. That's what I want to do. That's what I'll spend my life on. And kind of turned out that way. Although I went from chemistry ultimately into medicine, it was all still science. But music was right there all along. I loved what Huey was saying about music parties. I have to say this too, because it was such a joy to have that as part of my personal experience. When my wife and I, if we want to have a really special evening, usually a Friday or a Saturday, we'll invite maybe 50 people who aren't professional singers. Some of them would say they're not even particularly good singers, but they kind of like the idea. And whoever has an instrument, yeah, you can come to and you can be part of the band. And we make up the songbooks with 150 songs or so. So the lyrics are there so nobody can say they can't remember the second verse. And we'll start singing about 8 o'clock at night. And we'll maybe close down by midnight without really taking a break because it's just so enriching. And like Huey said, everybody goes out of there feeling so good. And in Washington, D.C., you need to feel good a lot right now. And we would invite people to these parties who at other instances in a political discussion might have been at each other's throats. And after a couple of songs, they get their arms around each other, they're singing together and harmonizing. Music has that ability. We have that as who we are. And I think evolution has used that to bring us together. And we need that more than ever.
One of the key attributes of both music and science is creativity. I'm very interested in the idea of an inception of a creative idea. And I'm going to actually ask each of you to think about your most creative moments in your career and how you think those things came to be. Francis, how did you figure out cystic fibrosis? Huey, how did you figure out some of your best songs and melodies and lyrics? How did that all happen?
You want to go first, Francis?
Yeah, for me, it's just like looking at a problem that you want to solve. So you got to be motivated by something that seems almost unsolvable. And then can I invent a way to tackle this problem that might get me there in less than 100 years? And that's what one had to do back in the 1980s when there was no genome project. I mean, heck, there was no internet. There were all these things that we didn't have available. That meant you had to go and find 3 letters that were misspelled out of 3 billion, like a needle in the haystack of the worst kind. And that meant really coming up with some creative things that might not work, but hey, let's try this. Pushing yourself into that space of being not completely sure it's going to work, taking a risk. That's what creativity is all about.
And Huey?
I think, well, I agree with that, but I think it's like a gift somehow, and I mean, when the muse comes, she comes. And the one thing you can do is to be disciplined enough to be ready to accept any idea. So there's a certain discipline involved, certain work involved, and you need to be attentive and ready. But I don't think it comes from inside. It comes from somewhere else, I think.
I love that.
Huey, most of us haven't had that experience. Can you walk us through that a little bit? So you're just living your life and you sense that you're getting some information or inspiration somewhere, and then you feel that you need to react to it?
That's it. And when you get the inspiration, the idea is to be true to the inspiration. And it's really hard. Sometimes I can hear a song or have an idea for a song and it's perfect. But now I got to try to actually get it on tape, and you have to write it, and it wants to get out of control, and you have to wrestle it back, and you have to just stay true to that gift, that original inspiration, stay as true as you can. I think songs tell you how they want to be written, problems tell you how they want to be solved, but you have to listen to them.
Do you have a song you're most proud of, Huey?
Well, yeah, I actually have one that I've never recorded yet because we just could somehow get it right. But but yeah, I don't think I'm finished. Okay, I'm hoping for the other implant, and then I'm gonna get back. But I still write in my head because I can still sing to myself and I can still hear music. I just can't play to anything else. The all other instruments sound crazy to me, but yeah, I have a couple of things that the sad part for me is I was still improving at a ripe old age, and it's kind of a shame. That's kind of a shame. But like Francis pointed out, I mean, enjoying music, it's such a wonderful thing. It's just such a wonderful thing, and that I'd like to get back to that. That would be an easy thing where I could just listen and enjoy.
Well, there are many people on this webinar whose life's mission is to be able to help you get back to that. And so we are still working on that. And then, Francis, do you have a scientific accomplishment you're most proud of?
Oh my. I think reading out the first copy of the human DNA instruction book, the human genome, felt so historic. This is our essence in a biological sense. The letters of that code inherited from parents down through the ages. This is somehow sufficient to create from a single cell a really complicated human being like you and me and all the people listening to this. It's just astounding that that's possible, that it works, but it does. And to have that first copy in front of us, which is what we achieved by 2003, that did feel like something for the ages.
Did you recognize it at the moment?
It came so gradually because we were sequencing most of this over the sort of about a 3-year period to build it up. So gradually, bit by bit, you were starting to see the architecture, and there were some big surprises along the way. But it was the kind of discovery that didn't sort of have a moment like, oh, that's it. Different than, say, finding the mutation that causes cystic fibrosis. There was a moment where that was like, oh, that's it. But reading 3 billion letters, as you got more and more of it, you could begin to see the shape of it, but you didn't have that sort of special, okay, this is it. And that's okay. That's the way
Incredible.
life is too.
And before we go to the public Q&A, just because we have so many questions, we'll very likely be going beyond the hour, just so people know we're not going to rush and cut off people. I have one last question. You both mentioned or implied this idea that both the arts and sciences are kind of under threat to a certain extent. What's your advice to people in music or your people in science or people trying to do both right now in these current times?
Well, I'll say what you're engaged in, if you're in the arts or in the sciences, is a noble activity, something that enriches humanity and helps us to flourish. And that is not something that's going to go away just because of a downturn in some other things that might be happening in our society or our general community. So hang in there, stick it out. Don't become discouraged beyond a certain point, because this will be something that is so important to our future that it will be sustained.
Thank you, Francis. How about you, Huey?
Wow. That's very well said, Francis. Art is for art's sake. And I'm always asked, what can we do? How do I make it or make it? I always say, look, it's unless it's all you want to do, go back to college and study Mandarin. You know, but if you have a calling, it's one, then just listen, open, but in the end, stick to what you think, and it's such a noble thing. Art makes people happy. It cheers the world up, and that's a very important thing, especially nowadays. So it's a noble pursuit, and just keep dancing.
Well, thank you both for the advice. I think we could all take some inspiration from what you've both said. It's a real honor and privilege to spend this conversation with you. And as much as I hate to stop my own conversation with you both, I'd love to invite the audience in. And so I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Nancy Young, who's going to moderate a public Q&A. And so thank you both for the conversation.
Thanks.
Great, thank you. So, Huey, most of the questions are directed at you, in several different there's several different categories. And, T-Lock, my friend T-Lock at Johns Hopkins, who is a researcher, he is interested in, did you do any specific retraining, any sort of specific therapy, music or listening and spoken language, some type of therapy to help you improve pitch perception? Similarly, let's see, someone else also, I'm trying to figure out who. Oh, yeah. Alex Chern. He asked whether your experience, whether your musical training, if you, was that helpful if you did do a formal rehab program? Was that training at all helpful to you?
Yeah, I didn't have any training. I'm not a, formally trained musician. I play by ear, but interestingly, um, uh, you know, uh, I, I think it helped me that I had that I had hearing, I had heard music, I knew I had been there, so I haven't really gone after what this gentleman's talking about, but I've harbored it in the back of my mind. And when I got my CI, I said, well, and everybody said, it's going to take a year. It's going to take a year, and you're going to get, and it's been getting better.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm about ready to dive into that, to struggle with that. I mean, it was so frustrating for me at first that I just left music alone. I said, let's see if I can hear people talk first, and and the other thing. But now conversation's okay, and so yeah. And I think if I get another one, I think I'll be even better. I really do, because
Yeah.
I have a regular old resound, regular old hearing aid here, and when I pull it out and just use the cochlear, I think it's a great exercise for me, and it gets better and better. I can now hear kind of. I can begin. I'm just a little better. That's all.
Yeah, I encourage you. I totally understand. I mean, you want to, I mean, the progress you've made with understanding speech and language, I think that's inspiring to not only us in the here about it, but for you. So I can see how that would be motivating. But I do encourage you to take it to the next level, because I'm, neuroplasticity exists even for us grown-ups, right? Even for us older grown-ups.
Right.
And history, cochlear implants really made that history, made that understanding clear, because prior to the cochlear implant, the neuroscience teaching was grown-ups didn't have neuroplasticity, only little kids.
Right.
And when Mike Merzenak, who was a researcher who is at UCSF, where Charles is now, he was present when the first cochlear implant made in the US was given to an adult. And he was a complete skeptic. He was drawn into this research because he was in the department. He had to do it. He based on what he was taught as a young neuroscientist, it wasn't going to work. And when he saw they can understand speech, he realized, oh my God, adults have neuroplasticity, and it changed the course of his career. He's considered by many to be the father of neuroplasticity. So I like that, because it gives me, people always, you get concerned we're aging, we can't do things as well as we used to. But you know what? There's hope for all of us if we work at things. At least that's my relentlessly optimistic approach to it. So, and I can appreciate your optimism, Mr. Lewis.
It's great that we're all so, we used to not live this long, and now, and colon cancer and heart disease have gone amazing. They've done amazing things with the two largest killers of all men, for example. So hearing loss is a bigger deal now than it ever was. And when I interact with all kinds of people, there's all kinds of hearing loss. And it spirals down. So this is it's an idea whose time has absolutely come, and a very exciting work with Charles and you are all doing. It's so great, so great.
So I have a question for all of you from Dr. Song from Korea. And he's a neurotologist and a researcher with great interest in neuroplasticity. And he said that one of his patients is a famous pop singer in Korea. And this singer is suffering from unilateral, so one-sided sudden hearing loss and severe tinnitus. And he's struggling with pitch perception. Specifically, the key seems to be a shift while he was singing. And he says that Dr. Song says he's currently considering a cochlear implant for his patient, and he would appreciate everyone's opinion on whether he should recommend a cochlear implant, and if so, what specific factors should be taken into consideration.
Who wants to handle that? Me? I don't know.
Yeah.
I'd be very careful with that because the pitch thing is really a problem, and I'd be very careful. I'll tell you this story. I was so bad because I resisted this. As I saw Charles and I saw Colin Driscoll a couple times and this stuff, and I resisted till the last minute. And I resisted so much so that when I got my CI, I was operated in the morning. The next day, I was implanted in the morning. The next day, they hooked me up at 24 hours later. And as soon as they hooked me up, and everybody said, "Oh, you got to be careful because it's going to take some getting used to, and it's a little scary," but nonsense. It was fabulous, right for the minute. I could suddenly hear people. I could understand people talking, and I streamed to my phone, and I streamed to the TV and technology, and it's just fantastic. It's fantastic.
And I'll just reply to Dr. Song. I would not recommend a CI for that patient's ear for musical purposes. I think for life purposes, speech purposes, very reasonable, but I would not at all suggest that that's the solution to the pitch issues. I would actually rather that ear be occluded and he uses one better ear for the pitch.
I think that's exactly correct.
Makes sense.
That's exactly what I would say as well. Until you can't converse.
Mr. Huey, I did a deep dive on the internet and I read about you. I listened to your interviews. I read that when you took the SATs, you got 800 in math. I was very impressed. You're much smarter than me.
I went to Cornell Engineering School for 5 minutes over a 2-year period. I mainly played music, but I love science. I've always, and I'm a Western guy. When this happened to me, I went to all kinds of Eastern stuff as well. Because people said, "Oh, we can fix you right up. We can fix you right up." I tried no salt, all organic, all kinds of crazy supplements. Taking 15 capsules in the morning, 20, and the difference I find is that with the Eastern or the third world stuff, they say, "I can help you. I can help you, but I need you for 6 months or 6 minutes, whatever." But it's my way or the highway. And the Western guys go, "Yeah, I think it might be this and it might be that." But talk to, who have you seen? "Oh, yeah, well, I know Nick. Yeah, let's talk." They share information. And they're not afraid to say, "We're not sure. We think and that's just makes so much more sense to me than also. So, and there's thousands of quacks out there, but I have a dossier. I have this thick with people who've been cured of Meniere's with cranial massage or acupuncture or or chiropractic or some kind of and what happened is it changes, it fluctuates, and it fluctuated that day, or something or whatever. But I don't know. I mean, what these guys are doing, what Charles, what you guys are onto, and you Dr. Young, what you guys are doing is what we need to do. You guys will figure this out. You're smart enough. You'll figure it out.
Um, I have a question on a different topic. I'm curious to know if our speakers have some comments on, and that is there's an otolaryngologist named John Lee, who is he's a musician, and he's very interested, he's very passionate about hearing protection. And he shared that his wife has hearing loss that was due to noise exposure. And his question for the panel is the following. He says, the World Health Organization recommends a concert limit of 100 dB, LAEQ 15, which is over my head, for what that means is 100 dB averaged over 15 minutes. And along the lines of the NIOSH recommendations, which are workplace related. And then his question is, do we generally agree that this is too restrictive, too lax, or just right?
I have no idea. I'll let Francis try.
Yeah, I'm afraid I don't know the basis of how those standards were set. Maybe Charles can help. I will say from my own personal observations, we put young people through systems that are much too noisy for their good. And when you, as a 75-year-old, you walk into one of those venues, you can't believe that people actually find that pleasurable.
Yeah,
Charles, do you know more about this limit?
Truth.
Actually, I think it's been an unregulated space, and I think it's one that if we actually applied sort of standard OSHA type of rules to it, it just would be it would be stopped. I mean, it's way too loud. It's more immersive. It's more fun. I mean, I'm sure when you give concerts, I mean, the loud volume it draws people in, but it is really a dangerous level of sound for most rock music concerts today and popular music concerts today for sure.
Yeah, the last concert I went to, and it was not the kind of music. It wasn't rock music. It was, I would say, more romantic music, but it was so loud. I sat there like this because I'd forgotten to bring my earplugs that I carry with me. I didn't have them that day. So yeah, I agree with all of you that it's way too loud at most venues. Let's see. Oh my gosh, here we have, this is interesting. Bill Slattery from the House Ear Institute. He wrote that he has a patient with lateral profound loss who has a cochlear implant, and they're a piano tuner, and he has no idea how this guy manages to do it. So that's fascinating and food for thought. And then he has another patient with single-sided deafness, so unilateral hearing loss, that is implanted, and they're a pop rock singer, and she finds it helps her performance, which is fascinating, and I think speaks to one of the themes of this conference, which is neuroplasticity. And that reminds me back to my patient I mentioned in the beginning. And in general, I mean, not all of the kids I implant who were, for the most part, born without hearing, very few of them are top-level musicians, but this one young man plays he got into a competitive orchestra playing the violin, which is such a difficult instrument. And then we have other kids, they may not play, but they sing, they enjoy it. The teenagers tell me that it helps them socially because, the better they, like, for instance, when we switched from, back in the day, we used to only implant one ear, Charles, and remember then we moved to the second ear. And those kids were so excited because they said when they could hear the music with the singer with two ears, they could hear the words better. And then they fit in better socially with their friends. They felt more part of things. So anyway, there's so much neuroplasticity, but Charles or Francis in particular, do you have any thoughts about neuroplasticity and why is it that some of these kids seem to hear more from music than adults?
I'm not sure I have a good answer. I'm curious about the piano tuner and wonder if that piano tuner also has an electronic tuner to assist in knowing exactly what the pitch is. Because when I'm tuning my guitar in a loud place where I can't even quite hear it because there's so much going on, as long as I got that tuner clipped onto the headstock, I can tune that thing perfectly just by looking at the dial. So maybe that's what the piano tuner is doing, I'm guessing.
It turns out that when some musicians, especially string players, guitar players, are tuning two tones, they're actually listening for temporal beating between two notes that are not quite in tune but are approaching in tune. And the cochlear implant can actually perceive temporal signals such as beats, even without the actual frequency matching. And so what you're really listening for is the elimination of the beating. And so I actually had a patient who was doing this. I was quite surprised. This was about 20 years ago that she told me she could do this. I didn't believe her at first. And then we sort of learned that she was sort of teaching us something. But it's all about plasticity, right? All of life is about plasticity. And I think the issue with the cochlear implant is that technology is not good enough for the brain. The brain is ready for more. We're just not able to give it more yet.
Well, this has been
I think that's about right. I think that's very perceptive.
Yeah.
I think it's very perceptive.
any more
You guys
comments?
got to figure this stuff out for us.
Well, research is so important.
I know Bill Slattery. He's the first guy I went to when I lost my hearing, day one. And we did the steroid thing and the steroids and shots in my room. And then they sent me to a neurologist. House here did, a immunologist named Renee Rinaldi, she's a neurologist. Turns out, as I go to the office, it says neurology. I said, "Oh, they said you were immunologist." Just, well, no, I'm a neurologist, but I've had a good experience with house ear patients and hearing, and we're going to put you on these drugs. We don't. It's trial and error. We're not sure what the hell, but we're going to put you on this, and we're going to start on the lower one. It's called sulfasalazine. And then we're going to go to, if that doesn't work, we'll try another one. And then we go, we have to be careful. We go to an upper raft of drugs. And so I'm taking she says the first one is the most benign one. We're going to do a pill a day for 7 days. You get blood work. 2 pills a day for the next week, blood work. 3 pills a day for the next week, blood work. 4 pills a day. And we're going to keep you on that afterward. So I'm thinking, this is the benign one. This is the start. And so now I'm going, and nothing else. So I called a pal of mine called Mark Singer. He's a great thoracic surgeon, neck surgeon. He saved my brother's life, and he works at UCS, CBMC, and he said, "Go see Nick Blevins at Stanford." So I went to see Nick Blevins at Stanford, and I told him my whole story. And Nick Blevins says, because the house here thought it was autoimmune. And Nick Blevins goes, it's been years, I think. I told him my whole story. So now I'm fishing with Tom Brokaw, and who's a pal of mine. And we go, and he makes a call because I'm still deaf. And he makes a call, and I go to Mayo Clinic where I see Dr. Colin Driscoll. And Driscoll listens to all my stuff, and he goes, it's not autoimmune. It's Meniere's. It's just. So I said, how do you know that? He said, well, autoimmune, both ears go at the same time, and you don't have any lupus or any other of these other sort of things. So I got off all those drugs, which was stuff. And so I mean, it's complicated.
It's complicated, and it's like my mother always said, second opinions are a good thing. And this is complicated. We need more research is needed. We don't know. We don't understand the underlying pathology for.
I love all the doctors and the scientists And I'm so appreciative of all of you that pursue this stuff. And it's not just because I've seen, Aaron Tward at UCSF, and I've seen uh, Steve Roush at Mass General, and all these, and it's just great that, I mean, this is it seems to me a great place to be right now. It's exciting. Hearing loss is so, pervasive anymore, especially living longer. And it just seems to be a wonderful thing to pursue. So thanks for, all your attention to this.
Well, thank you. So I think it's time to move to our close. And Charles, do you have a few words you wanted to say before I make my closing remarks?
So many comments, but mostly just gratitude for your time and thoughts and sharing your stories with me. I will tell you, to me, the answer to a lot of these things is actually more funding to support science and research. And so, Francis, the struggles of funding, but Huey, you may not be as versed in this. It's really hard for researchers to make it today. And so we desperately want to have the resources to solve these problems, and hopefully we'll be able to get them. And I really thank you for your advocacy, Dr. Collins for your leadership, and Dr. Young for assembling all of us together. Thank you.
Well, I would also like to thank our speakers for such an enlightening and inspiring experience. And Francis, I want to thank you for your leadership and contributions to science that have and will continue to improve the health of mankind. The world is a better place because of you. Huey, thank you so much for sharing your personal journey with Meniere's disease and hearing loss. Your optimism shines through and is inspiring. And in the words of Maya Angelou, nothing can dim the light which shines from within. Charles, your research and creativity are amazing. The AOS looks forward to your expert talk on musical creativity and the brain that will take place in April at the AOS meeting in Phoenix. I invite everyone to join us again for our June 9th AOS webinar on tinnitus and the brain. This webinar is a joint venture with our esteemed colleagues in the Korean Otological Society. Tinnitus is a growing health issue worldwide. It impacts quality of life and can be disabling. The webinar will explore advances in the neuroscience of tinnitus and its treatment. And finally, I would like to ask Sujana Chandrasekhar, AOS past president and council member, to join us. She is our webinar and social media expert and has been working tirelessly behind the scenes during this webinar. And Sujana, I want to thank you for your friendship, your leadership, and your many contributions to the AOS, including establishing this webinar series. You go, girl.
Thank you so much, Nancy. This was such a treat, such a treat. I'm going to be super nerdy. I created a couple of lines based on the work of one of the panelists. Well, this was some kind of wonderful. I know what I like, and if this is it, it's really a perfect world. Between Nancy, Charles, Francis, and Huey, we see that it's hip to be square. We're all working for a living and doing it all for everyone's baby. We all want a new drug, but it's all right. And reaching into the heart of rock and roll, we're cruising on the Pineapple Express and going back to the future with the power of love. So thank you so much. What a fantastic seminar. How much did we
Well
learn?
done.
Yes.
I told you,
Well
my
done,
entire
indeed.
youth was misspent with you, Huey Lewis.
Sujana, you are so clever. My closing thoughts on music. First, in the words of Maya Angelou, our music has the ability to create ideas in you and me. It has the ability to encourage us to be creative. And in the words of St. Augustine, to sing is to pray twice.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
That's really beautiful.
Thank you to our speakers, and thank you to everyone for joining us this evening.